Okay. In the midst of all of this, President Emmanuel Macron of France has weighed in. Here's what he said. I think it was on New Year's Eve. France will continue to help Ukraine, quote, without fail, and, quote, until victory itself. We will build a just and durable peace together. Count on France and count on Europe. Is he talking about troops? What is he talking about, as you understand this? Or is this just political pabulum for the French press?
I think it's a combination of all the above. He's also made comments about finding a way forward that's not going to involve compelling Russia to give up all of its gains. He's already said publicly, we can't expect the Russians to give up Crimea. And he said we should have pressed ahead in the Minsk agreements and done a better job with Luhansk and Donetsk and so forth. I think it depends on which audience he's talking to and when you hear him.
All right. Here's General Stoltenberg, the commander of NATO. I call on allies to do more. It is in all our security interests to make sure Ukraine prevails and Russian President Vladimir Putin, he mentions him by name, does not win. This is pretty direct and in your face, Secretary General of NATO to President of Russia, isn't it, Colonel?
Well, let's stop and think about what he's just said. How many times did you hear FDR or any of the leading lights in the U.S. military or the government during World War II complain about the failure of the British or the Soviets to do enough? This is a trick question.
Yeah.
Never. All right?
Right.
That's nonsense. We never made those kinds of comments because they were in the fight long before we were, and they were heavily engaged. We were giving them everything we could to keep them engaged until we could bring force to bear against them. My point is, if this were a successful operation, a successful war effort, you wouldn't be begging your allies to do more. The truth of the matter is that Europeans overwhelmingly want nothing to do with this war, and their governments know it.
Is there military significance to what Secretary General Stoltenberg said? Does he command troops? Can he order troops in?
Stoltenberg is a mouthpiece for whomever governs Washington, for whomever is president of the United States, whatever the administration is. He says and does what Washington tells him to. And he can snap his fingers, he can crack his whip, but you can't create armies and forces out of nothing. It takes a long time to put people into organizations, into formations, train them, equip them. This is not something you do quickly. Frankly speaking, that's why we've been waiting for several months now, watching the Ukrainians impale themselves on Russian defenses, because the Russians are doing exactly that. They're getting ready all of these massive military formations to attack. So what if we start going down the list? And the French army is designed to conduct safaris in North Africa. The British army is smaller and less capable. You know, the United States Marine Corps is larger and better equipped and better organized to fight than most of the European forces. The Poles are now bringing up, we think, 200,000 men. I'm told they've already got 90,000 mobilized, and they're trying to get them ready so that they can build their army up, presumably to defend Poland, but I worry about other things, as we know.
Well, General, I am very concerned about Poland. You and I have discussed this. You know this better than almost anybody. There's 90,000 Poles on active duty. There's 40,000 Americans intermingling and training with them. They are just they are just west of the Poland-Ukraine border. Now you tell me that this crazy president of Poland, who thinks that somehow Crimea is going to go back to Ukraine when this is over, is about to add 250,000 more troops.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where the hair trigger could occur, in my view, that would start World War III. What do you think?
Well, here's the other thing. The Poles see themselves as a great nation that has been deprived of its opportunity to be great. They were great 400 years ago. They were powerful in Europe, the largest state in Europe, the most powerful military force in Europe 400, 500 years ago. They would really like to be that again. And so when you listen carefully to the Poles and you watch their television, they're talking about expanding Poland to regain control of territories they once governed. That's not necessarily a NATO objective. And I don't think that the majority of NATO partners are going to stand by and say, oh, yes, charge forward. Let's support the annexation of Western Ukraine. And by the way, Minsk used to be part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
That would be insane. That would be insane.
Of course. So the Poles are not playing with a full deck in strategic terms right now. And we're doing nothing to rein them in. On the contrary, we're encouraging them.
Recently, the Ukrainians, using either missiles or drones, attacked a building where Russian troops were housed. Adjacent to the building, I think stupidly and foolishly, but I'm not the military guy. I'm just a simple lawyer. Adjacent to the building where the Russians had stored munitions. It appears that the munitions exploded. Close to 100 Russians were killed. And now it appears that the Ukrainian missiles, American missiles, were able to zero in somehow because they knew that Russian troops were there because they were using their cell phones. Can you explain this?
6 HIMARS missiles were fired, or rockets, if you will, were fired at this target. It was a company-sized element, almost 200 men. 4 of those missiles or rockets were shot down. 2 went in and blasted the area and caused at least 89 deaths, as the Russians are now reporting them, another 100 casualties. The Ukrainians, of course, this is a piece of good news for a change. They inflicted some serious losses on the Russians. They're very happy. In the grand scheme of things, it's irrelevant. But the truth is, and we're told that this was a mobile phone, or at least 2 mobile phones, but the truth is that if you know where the cell phone towers are and people use their mobile phones, simple triangulation will provide you with a target.
What was this target?
The other thing we need to keep in mind is that, remember, we're providing the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, the overhead capability, the communications. I'm sure we had a role in this, because once you find that target, you've got to strike it immediately. And they did.
Was this target in Russia, or was it in Ukraine?
It was in Ukraine. But the thing is this, that could happen to us, could happen to the United States Army. The Russians have actually done this pretty well to date. It's a mistake. It's an accident. It shouldn't have happened. And these people would probably be alive. But this is something we should watch carefully, because we'll fight in the future. And we have an enormous problem with very talkative soldiers on radios and on cell phones. And it makes it very easy to find you.
Sounds like all military have those problems. Russians, Ukrainians, Americans.
Yes, of course. And they paid a price. And I'm sure, knowing Sorovikin, that there will be some people that will be on the chopping block for presiding over this disaster.
Even though it doesn't exist anymore, the January 6th committee, I don't know how this happens, keeps releasing transcripts of interrogations of people concerning January 6th. And you pointed out to me an interesting one involving the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley. Did General Milley say anything in there that was of interest to you and might be of interest to our viewers with respect to the political, the woke, W-O-K-E, nature of today's military, and with respect to the hard, fast obligation of the military to obey lawful, I think he either raised his voice or repeated the word, civilian orders?
Well, the 20 Republicans who are currently trying to hold the line against McCarthy have already demanded that all of that information be released, all of those transcripts.
Right.
What we're getting are bits and pieces that are designed, for the most part, to defame the Trump administration and Donald Trump at the top. So right. I'm sure there are things in there that you can point to. The problem with General Milley, I don't think he has a great deal of self-awareness. And he has stepped out of line, in my judgment, many, many times. You'll recall this bizarre phone call to the Chinese chief of staff telling him that everything was under control and that if we, for any reason, were about to launch an attack against China, he would call them in advance to warn them. I mean, that's one of the more bizarre incidents in his military career. You'll recall that the issue with the church, where Donald Trump decided to go over to the church that had been partially burned down during the riots.
Right.
And he took a Bible with him. He didn't say very much, but he wanted to identify with what had happened there and say it was wrong. Subsequently, General Milley decides to apologize for participating in that, which is a little odd. I'm not sure why he apologized, but I think we've had a politicized senior leadership in the military for many, many decades. It really gets off the ground with Jack Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. They were the first to start being photographed on a routine basis with 4 stars from the various services. That did not occur previously. If you go back and look at FDR's term in office, when Marshall testified in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, or anybody did from the Navy, 90% of the time they appeared in civilian clothes. They did not show up with their uniforms, because traditionally people concluded, well, if they wear this uniform, they might intimidate people on the other side. And we want to reinforce the fact this is a republic. We're not a monarchy. This is not an imperial state. Well, all of that really went away with JFK, and you had a series of 4 stars who then became props. Earl Wheeler, who was the first chief of staff of the Army, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs before Earl Wheeler, Maxwell Taylor, this kind of thing. Eisenhower absolutely abhorred that sort of thing, loathed it, and wouldn't have anything to do with it. So when Eisenhower showed up, it was Eisenhower and nobody else. Or if he had somebody with him, they were in civilian clothes. So this is a long-term problem, but it seems that General Milley has made it much, much worse, because he eagerly embraced all of the policies that, quite frankly, most of us, had we been given the choice, would have rejected as deleterious to Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine fighting power, cohesion, discipline. That involves everything from transgender types being forced on the military to the integration of women into ground combat units. I mean, but he's eagerly embraced all of that. I think part of that is his nature to do whatever the boss wants, but I also think he genuinely leans to the left. I know that when Hillary Clinton was running for office and he was chief of staff of the Army, allegedly he was telling people that he was a, what's the right word, blue dog Democrat or something,
right?
At which all of us,
a blue dog Democrat is a conservative Democrat. Is he a conservative Democrat who somehow liked Hillary?
I don't know. He was apparently very, very fond of and supportive of Hillary Clinton. But, having said that, what was unusual is that I don't remember in my career any senior officer in any open setting in the hallway or in a meeting ever identifying with anybody that was running for office.
Right.
Now, whatever they felt publicly was another matter, but never had I heard anything like that. So I think he's a different character, but I also think he's part windsock and part unaware of himself, his position, and the consequences.
And yet, you talk about the selective release of the transcript. I mean, I don't know how much of the transcript they released, but the portion that I read, he attacked the concept of politics in the military. It's almost as if he suddenly has become aware of the impression that he himself has given. How long is his term? Do you know? Is he going to be replaced by Joe Biden?
Well, it's normally a 4-year term, and that would probably suggest next October.
Got it. Colonel, always a pleasure, no matter what we talk about. Thank you very much for your insight. Thank you for your time. I hope we can talk again next week.
All right. Thanks, Judge.
Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.